very senior journalist associated now with the Sunday Guardian and the News X group of television channels. That is Professor M.D. Nalapat. So we welcome Dr. Swamy and Professor M.D. Nalapat to our show. And we'll have two topics for discussion today. As you know, we meet every Sunday at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time. And today is our 77th show of Gyan Ganga Words of Wisdom. Today we'll be having in the first half of the program, or the first starting the program, we'll ask Dr. Swamy on the present status of the investigation in the SSR murder mystery and what is the exact status of the investigation. And in the next part of the show, we, Dr. Swamy and Mr. Professor Nalapat, will be having a detailed discussion on the exact situation on the India-China border and other issues related with it. With this, I request Dr. Swamy to please tell us on the status of the SSR case. I wish to thank my co-host, Professor Arvind Chaturvedi from Delhi, and Mr. Ramesh Swamy for hosting the program, and also our technical team led by Ashish Shetty, Ramesh Gadgi, Tejas Swaminathan, Ishwar Iyer, and Vishal Mehta for their background support for putting this Sunday program together. I also wish to inform our viewers that as announced on Dr. Swamy's birthday program on the 15th of September, from Saturday, that is from the 3rd of October, we are starting an additional program of legal Gyan Ganga, legal words of wisdom, which will be again on Saturday at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time. And Dr. Venkat Iyer would be giving us a lot of information on the basics of legal issues for the information and usefulness for our viewers. So that program, besides our Sunday program, we have an additional program on Saturday at 8 p.m. This viewers may kindly note. So we will be again meeting on next Saturday at 8 p.m. with Dr. Swamy and Professor Venkat Iyer. With this, over to Dr. Swamy.
Thank you, Jagdish. Welcome to our special guest today, Professor Nalapat, and one of the senior executive editors of Sunday Guardian, and also a scholar in the field of national security, and he studied China very thoroughly. And then we have Professor Chaturvedi, who is an economist by training, has a PhD from IIT, and then, of course, Jagdish Shetty, who is the General Secretary of our Virat Hindustan Sangam, as well as we have N. Ramesh, who's a wizard in electronics. He's based in the United States, and his knowledge is used by the New York State Police and so on. And so he's been extreme. Not only is he a member of VHS, but he's also been extremely helpful to us in setting up these webinars, you may call it, or online interactions. So as far as this Sushant Singh Rajput's untimely, unnatural death, which we all consider is, by all that we know now, is nothing but murder and conspiracy to murder. And so after the Supreme Court ruled, the CBI has been moved into the investigation. Sushant was found dead on the 14th of June. And I think there was a chorus, and it was a kind of a coordinated chorus. The police, the government, the cabinet of Maharashtra government, and all that put together only had one song to sing, and that was that this is a suicide, and that he was depressed because he was his career was declining, going to the rocks, etc., etc. And surprisingly, the the Mumbai police also made this statement almost instantaneously that this was it was a suicide, and did not register any FIR, even though there were many people who were saying so many things. All this information should have been put in FIR. They didn't. And for about 67 days or so, they did not do it. It's a record as far as this matter is concerned, of just investigating without a FIR. So ultimately, this is, Supreme Court directed. And so therefore, the CBI got into the act. CBI has also spent about, I think, 40 days and not yet registered an FIR. Enforcement Directorate has done investigation, and it is they don't go by FIRs. They make charges, and then they bring people and have them investigated and interrogated. And so they have done the financial angle, the financial flows, and so on. And then the Narcotics Board, which is called NCB, which has been looking at the fact that this whole crime angle has been magnified by the fact that the film actors and actresses have been engaging in buying and using narcotics elements, which has been procured through Hawala route, and could lead to the gangsters in Dubai. So this is now become a kind of an omnibus investigation. But there was a decision taken by these three agencies that an All India Institute of Medical Sciences board should be set up to give them a report on the forensic aspect, and that is to determine what evidence the Bombay hospital, Cooper Hospital, had collected after having the body of Sushant, and then cutting it up and so on, and getting all the aspects of his situation. And then, of course, the next day the body was cremated. So all that All India Medical Institute had was just this, the report of the Cooper Hospital autopsy. And on that basis, they had to make up their mind as to what really happened. And I believe, I have not seen, nobody has seen the report because it hasn't been submitted yet, but they have come to the conclusion that to rule out murder was wrong, and that is within the realm of possibilities, but it can be only confirmed in view of the fact that they didn't have the body, that by circumstantial evidence, which CBI was investigating. But the CBI, under the law, should have, if not immediately, but very soon, have registered an FIR. And the Supreme Court has made that very clear number of times. And the last time it made it very clear was 2014. And I'm reading from the Code of Criminal Procedure, which tells you how to conduct a criminal trial, or reach a criminal trial and then a judgment. And what it says is that the FIR is registered under section 154 of the CRPC, Criminal Procedure Code. IPC tells you all the offenses and what is the punishment for it. And CRPC gives you the procedure for reaching the level of a conviction or a non-conviction. And that procedure starts with an FIR, and that is called section 154, which says every information relating to the commission of a cognizable offense. There are two kinds of offenses, cognizable and non-cognizable. And generally speaking, anything that causes unnatural death is cognizable offense. So this was a cognizable offense. If the information is given orally to an officer on charge of a police station, and which shall be reduced in writing by him or under his direction. this is what it says, that somebody comes and gives you information, somebody's dead. Probably on the basis of, on the basis of some unnatural event. And so on that basis, they're just recorded. So what I'm saying is that there was a unnatural death, and therefore the police should have, on the basis of the information received, should have registered an FIR. And how fast and how with how much diligence the Supreme Court in 2014, in a case of Lalita Kumari and the government of Uttar Pradesh, said the word shall, because there's a word said shall be reduced in writing under the direction of the police. So shall, it says the word shall used in section 154 leaves no discretion in the police officer to hold preliminary inquiry before recording the FIR. There is no scope for preliminary inquiry, and Bombay police did it for 67 days, and these people have done for 40 days. This is illegal. We can tolerate it, but there's a limit to that. And then it says the use of the expression information without any qualification in the clause also denotes that the police has to record the information despite the police being unsatisfied by its reasonableness or credibility. So police can't say, this doesn't look reasonable. If somebody says there's been a murder at such and such place, they record the name of the informant and then put down and register FIR. FIR gives the permission for the police to start the investigation. And then if it's cognizable, they can issue a warrant and so many other things. Why has the CBI not registered an FIR? This is, and that too after 40 days. All right, you say you came in after much time had elapsed, so you are collecting documents and so on. All right, give you some time. But why? When according to me, my information is that the All India Medical Institute autopsy said that murder is not ruled out. So why don't you register it under section 302 of the IPC that this is a murder? And we are investigating. It doesn't bind the police to stick to it. Then the police in the end has to file what is called as a final report. This is first information report is FIR. So the first information you get, you do. Why have they not done it? And why so long? And after all, the CBI, the Supreme Court said the CBI may investigate only on the grounds that the confidence was, people lost the confidence in the Bombay police for having taken so much time and still not registered an FIR. So I think this is an issue which is gaining traction, and there are a lot of unhappiness in the followers. And I think the CBI has to now register an FIR as soon as possible. And then, of course, all the other materials of the Enforcement Directorate and the Narcotics Bureau, all these can be pulled together. There is now sufficient, witness cross-examination, examining, recording contradictions, to name even some of the likely suspects who have to be later on brought under a charge. So I think we are, with this little push and public pressure, which is justified public pressure, because all the public is asking for is the enforcement of the law and the Supreme Court judgments. And this law says that when you're informed, you put it in writing. And that's called FIR under section 154. And Supreme Court says you have no right to evaluate this, whether it's good, reasonable, unreasonable. Somebody is referred to an event which is a crime under IPC. So you have to, without letting your personal views on whether the data is reliable, not reliable, you have to record it. And that I think now it will become more and more difficult. Otherwise, we'll have to go back to the Supreme Court and say they will direct the police to register an FIR, and the police will get us CBI will get a censure from the Supreme Court. So I think the CBI should not risk that possibility. And I think then the fans will be satisfied, and then they will wait for filing of the final charges, or framing of the charges will be done by the court after submission of a charge sheet. So a charge sheet has to be submitted. In Tharoor case, as you know, charge sheet has already been submitted and charges are being framed. And so this is the way to proceed. And I think there's a suspicion because recently BJP people, some BJP leader, I think former Chief Minister Fadnavis met Sanjay Raut of the Shiv Sena, and so there's a lot of speculation. And today Pawar and the Congress had got upset and had gone and met Thackeray. So any impression is being created that because now we are going to form a government in Maharashtra with the help of Shiv Sena. Therefore, Shiv Sena, which appears to be complicit according to some reports for some reason, maybe the BJP doesn't want to put them in the harm's way. I don't know what the truth is, but the fact is, all I know is the CBI has violated the law by not registering an FIR. And the moment the FIR is registered, then everything will go on due process, and the trial will also be easily in sight, and the case can be then concluded. This is what I have to say about Sushant. If you have any queries, I can answer those, but otherwise we'll go to this more national importance, international importance. National importance, Sushant's murder has got national importance in a big way, but I think international importance, and that is our difficulties with the Chinese on our land and on the border. And who better than Manu Nalapat? So is there any questions amongst you three people?
Dr. Swamy, I just want to say that Mumbai police was being criticized for a long time for not registering the FIR. And that's why Supreme Court also intervened and said that the inquiry be handed over to CBI. And yes, you have now just raised this question, which is very pertinent, that why is CBI not registering? If CBI has violated the law, who is going to punish CBI? Or is there any accountability for this? Who will answer this question?
No, the CBI can be censured by the Supreme Court and even require some people to be dismissed from service. I mean, Supreme Court has a lot of powers under Article 142 of the Constitution. But it will be embarrassing for the government because CBI is technically under the Prime Minister. Although the Prime Minister can't direct how an investigation should be done, but the CBI owes an explanation to the Prime Minister. And so maybe a letter to the Prime Minister could be written saying, why is the CBI not done what the law requires? And don't you think that you should take some action against the people in the officialdom of the CBI?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Swamy, for raising this issue and reminding viewers that this is an issue which was all over the country, and youth were really agitated over this issue. And we thought that by handing it over to CBI, the things will subside. But this question remains. Now let's move to a very important question of the day, that is the exact situation on the Indo-China border. We have Professor Nalapat. Dr. Swamy, will you please start the conversation between the two, and two experts on the China issue will throw some new light.
Okay. He is an intellectual, scholar, independent, and nationalist. I am a member of a political party which is ruling today. So therefore, I think we might hear him more because he might give us more an objective analysis. But from I make a short point. We discovered the Chinese, I think originally there was a lady officer who discovered their presence in big numbers in in April sometime of this year. And but people thought, based on the inputs we got from the Russians, it was just a routine exercise of the Chinese. So she, poor lady, got transferred out of her job. So now in May we found out the hard way that they had come and they had all kinds of intentions. And on June mid-June, there was a conflict in which 20 soldiers of ours died in hand-to-hand combat. And unknown number, the Chinese, people say much larger than the Indian numbers, had taken place. And then negotiations began. But what Mr. Nalapat has to tell us, what are we negotiating about? Is there any doubt that the Chinese are in Indian territory, or is there no doubt and that they should not come back? So we are negotiating that they should not come back again. What's the exact position in terms of troop deployment and their location, and what's the importance of those locations? Over to Mr. Nalapat.
Well, of course, I'd like to say that my knowledge of this would probably be less than your knowledge of this kind of situation, because you are, associated with the ruling party, and I'm completely outside government. But I would like to make the point that we hear statements from both sides, but we must remember that there are essentially three lines that we are talking about, and one is a very, very wavy line. The first line is the international border as such. That is the international border as of 1947, 15th of August, which is frankly the frontier of India. The second line is the ceasefire line, or the line of actual control. And the third line is what the Chinese feel is their territory, which is in fact coming into even more into our territory. So the ceasefire line comes into territory as defined by the international border of 15th August 1947. And then the Chinese basically do not recognize that line, and they have come further, and the Chinese have essentially got what I would call a rolling ceasefire line, in which they keep trying to push it outward and push it outward. So the problem is, when you get a statement, we are not very sure, are we talking about about which line of actual control we're talking about? Are we talking in terms of the line of actual control that we regard as the line of actual control, which was after the 1962 conflict? Or are we talking about the Chinese line, which they believe to be the case? Or are we talking about something in between? So as a result, you have a lot of discussions and statements, but because of the fact that we have three lines, and as I said, the last line, the Chinese don't even recognize that there's a line of actual control. They basically try and keep it moving forward, forward, forward. They certainly don't recognize the 15th August 1947 line. They've been explicit about it throughout the frontier. And we, in our case, have a clear idea of what was the ceasefire line in 1962. And for us, as I see it, that is the line of actual control. So the difficulty, Dr. Swamy, is essentially that we have to define which line we're talking about when we say that intrusion has happened, how deep the intrusion is. So the Chinese may say there's been no intrusion, because from their point of view, from their rolling ceasefire line, they've only gone into their own land. And in our case, the question is, are we talking about the 1947 line, the 62 line, or the line that is today a reality on the ground? So this is the problem which basically the public will be facing when you have multiple statements on this issue.
Okay, let me come in on that. According to my understanding, in 1947, August 15th, as you have fixed, there were four parts of then what was called as Jammu Kashmir. One was the Kashmir part. The second was Jammu part. The third was the Ladakh part. And the fourth was the Aksai Chin part. Now, during Nehru's dreamy period of the 1950s, when Hindi Chini Bye Bye was being recited. And we gave away Tibet without any preconditions on the border. Chinese slowly encroached and took away the whole of Aksai Chin. And we were left with what is called as Ladakh. And say 62 led to a ceasefire line. It was much more than that. Narasimha Rao's period, it was mutually agreed line of actual control. But it was not delineated on the map. It was on the ground, excuse me. It was not demarcated on the ground. It was delineated in the map. And you know, map can be small, can be big. And so it was meant for starting negotiations. And there was some grumbling at that time with Mr. Narasimha Rao. And I remember this vividly because I held a minister rank position in his government as the chairman of the WTO involved labor standards and international trade. So I knew that, and Narasimha Rao felt to kickstart the negotiations, we can agree to some line without prejudice to our claims on both sides. Now, having agreed to that line and also agreed by a resolution within Li Peng and Narasimha Rao that neither side will use force to alter that line. The Chinese have violated that, according to my understanding. And I want to know you to answer that question, number one. Number two, at one stage, the Prime Minister said that nobody has come and nobody has gone from our area. Was he misled by whom? Because obviously the Prime Minister sitting in Delhi can't know every minute point. He said it, and the Chinese, of course, played it up in a big way in there. Third question I think I would like you to answer is, the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, and Xi Jinping, the long time, I think, for life dictator. I think he's now been declared a dictator for life, or I think called president. And they have met 18 times in 5 years of the first term of Mr. Modi. What is it that Xi Jinping can be now said to have done? Has he betrayed Modi, or there was a lack of understanding in the talks? Because we don't have a white paper, so we really don't know what the two talked in these 18 meetings. But I would like to know from you, do we have any proof that the Chinese who say that your line of control was on the map but not on the ground, and according to us on the ground it goes, as you said, wavy, and therefore what we have occupied is our part of the land of control. So all this confusion is the reason there have been lots of talks and so on. But now it is quite clear when it comes to the Galwan side and Drepsang area, the Chinese have occupied a lot of area. And according to one newspaper, the Hindu, it said that it was quoting a unnamed military source in our side that they have occupied about 1,000 square kilometers. Now, therefore, should we be negotiating, sending our ministers all the way to Russia and negotiating and on the question of disengagement? Disengagement means you are face to face, you back off, but that doesn't mean they leave our territory. So should we be focusing on Chinese walking out of every inch of the territory that was agreed to in 1993, or that is the line of control on the map, or we should start negotiating in the new status quo? Instead of status quo ante, should we be status quo? So these are the questions which I think you might care to answer and put wise all the members of the VHS and others who are watching this program.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that any of the members of VHS who are watching this program, let's say they have a business transaction with someone, and let's say that they complete a sale, and there is no check given, and there is no check written, and no consideration has been given, but they go back and say, well, we have sold this particular property, and of course, the property has been handed over, but no check has been given, no money has been given. Well, then, after that, if the other side says that, well, what are you talking about? This is my property. I've always had it. And if, it's obvious from the fact that I haven't given you anything. So why are you, even suggesting that this is your property? If it were your property, I would have paid you.
Could you translate that into common, simple English, please?
I'd simply like to say that, look, the fact is that if you are believing in promises, then all I can say is that you are heading into a slope which is not a very great slope from the point of view of diplomacy and from the point of view of geopolitical advantage. The reality of the situation is the Chinese have a clear concept of the line. But in my opinion, from the time of Xi Jinping, there has been a change in that concept. And the change in that concept, according to me, is that with the China-Pakistan economic corridor, the Chinese are investing something like $60 billion. That is not casual change. They're not investing this money because they love the khaki color of the Pakistan army soldiers or something like that. They're very hard-headed people. They've obviously got a game plan. Now, geopolitical game plans also involve territory. And this is something which the thinking has evolved, analysis has evolved, and my thinking and my analysis also has evolved over the last, since the CPEC was formed. And in my view, the Chinese are now very clear that they have now, in a sense, signed on to the Pakistan side, so far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned. And of course, that includes Ladakh. In other words, that the whole of Jammu and Kashmir, including Ladakh, should belong to Pakistan. And a lot of their dispositions, a lot of their activities, I can tell you, can be seen only in that particular context. Of course, which now we are talking about getting back POK. And they are, in my view, thinking about getting Ladakh and getting the Kashmir Valley and possibly a large part of Jammu from us. So I would only like to say, Dr. Swamy, that the Chinese thinking evolves. The Chinese are not, do not have this, the bureaucratic culture of going by precedent and by going by past precedent so that you keep, doing the same thing over and over again. No, they change, they evolve based on how much they feel they can get away with. And in Xi Jinping, they have a leader who is very confident the Chinese can get away with a lot. And in my view, we have to understand this is a whole new ball game. So all the agreements that you're talking about, Narasimha Rao's period, Vajpayee's period, anybody else's period, poor Manmohan Singh's period, I can tell you these at that time were not worth the paper it was printed on, for the simple reason that no check was paid. You're handing over, an advantage without getting anything in return, but you're getting a promise, an oral promise that, look, I've got my checkbook. This is my checkbook. Now you can see I've got 50 leaves in my checkbook, and I'm going to write a wonderful check as soon as I sit down and my mind is tranquil and I've got a pen. I'll sit down and write that check. Multiple times this has happened. No check has been written, but multiple times we have agreed to that particular transaction. I'm not going to go into why this has happened or why it does not happen. I have not spent one day of my life inside the government, not one day in any capacity. You have, I have not. So I don't expect to understand that. But I'd only like to say, as far as the Chinese are concerned now, in my view, the entirety of Jammu and Kashmir, as defined by the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, in their view and from the point of view of their policy, belongs to Pakistan. The early warning was the CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It was called the CPEC, even that part which went through POK, there was no change in that. Subsequently, a lot of what they have been doing is also forming part of that. So now I'm fully convinced that's what they have in mind. They aim essentially to detach whatever we have left of Jammu and Kashmir and hand it over to the Pakistanis, who will then hand a significant share back to them. So I think this is the game that is being played now. And I think it's important for us to understand that, because if any of us, if any of the people in India are believing that we are negotiating on the behalf of something that happened in 1962 or 1994 or 2003 or 2005, well, I'm sorry to say, I don't believe that that is the case. You are negotiating from the point of view of 2020. And right from 2017, it is very clear as daylight, that the Chinese want the Pakistanis to get hold of the whole thing. And I want to say, Dr. Swamy, you talked about Aksai Chin. Well, if you look at, you speak Mandarin very well. There were Mandarin reports from 51, 52, 53, how important the territory of Aksai Chin was as a link to Xinjiang and Tibet. And they were there, and planning was going on for building that road. And I think that the construction started towards the end of 53 or something like that, if I remember. That again was not a state secret. It was public. Anybody who read Mandarin would have seen that. So I only want to say, if they have done something covertly, they have done something covertly in broad daylight, advertising it to the whole world. I think what happened was, we have been prisoners of our own misconceptions about what the Chinese are, about the Chinese intentions, and about basically about the objectives of the Chinese. And we have framed policy with regard to that misconception. And I again repeat, multiple times we have handed over advantages without getting an actual check back. But in some cases, we have a promise of the check. So now we can say, look, 116 times or so, we have got promises of checks. The total amount of check is this much. When am I going to get that? I think we are going to wait an awfully long time before those checks get written out.
So, sir, if you were to make the decision, what would you tell the nation? That we are going to recover every inch of our territory. Till that time, we will not talk, or we will talk and convince the Chinese that they are, made a mistake and please withdraw, and expect that they will withdraw. There are a number of alternatives. There are occasions when the Chinese, you talk to them after being, after being held that they'll never yield. They might suddenly yield. For instance, in Kailash Mansarovar, I was told that they'll never agree. It's a communist country. How will they agree? But they did agree. And I was also told trade agreement, they will never agree. And so I signed a trade agreement. So I think that would be the kind of situation it was, that that time the Americans were, the Chinese wanted to please the Americans very much, and our government of Chandrasekhar was thought to have very good relations with the Americans. Maybe they agreed. But today, on today's thing in the background, number one, do you think that the Russians will play any role to make the Chinese back down, number one? Number two, if the Chinese don't back down, that is, go back to where the line was in 1994 to begin with, because there was a mutual agreement whether they were committed to it or not, but there was an agreement. It is on paper, and two prime ministers signed it. Say that you first get back, and then you want something badly, then talk to us. We'll tell you what we want badly. Maybe you can give us let us take POK, and we may adjust you a little here near the Karakoram Pass, something like that. What do you suggest we do? You can't go on every day saying one meeting, another, now foreign minister going, then the national security advisor is going, and they are meeting, defense minister is going, and then we are meeting tomorrow for further discussion. So what would you say concretely if you were in charge? what India should do in its national interest and its self-respect.
Well, I would like to say that there is no harm in having meetings, but please understand the Chinese are going to analyze the body language, the wording of every meeting, and they will look for evidence of willpower or lack of willpower. And so far, very frankly, across the decades, it has been seen that there is a certain lack of willpower, either to gain advantage or to hold on to advantages. I mean, you've seen, in so many negotiations, including, whether it's Tashkent or Shimla or so many other negotiations, the willpower to hold on to advantages has not been there. And secondly, the ambition to have a major advantage has also not been there. In the 65 war, for example, the army chief did not want basically his lieutenant general to go into Pakistan territory even further and to surround Sialkot and Lahore. He was opposed to that. He said, my God, a civilized country will not do that. And, he was opposed to that. So I would only like to say that if these negotiations are evidence, the people, I don't know what's going on in these negotiations, but I have a lot of regard for the foreign minister, Jaishankar. He's an extremely erudite individual. He's a committed patriot, and he's been a strong supporter of Prime Minister Modi. I know that when Modi was CM Modi, at that point in time, I had a long conversation with him, and he made clear his respect for the chief minister at that time. I only want to say that, look, the reality of the situation is that we have to be ambitious now. And ambition basically means the next time around, this has got to be a 62 in reverse. It has got to be a crushing Chinese defeat on the ground. And that means basically going into the Tibetan plateau, because Tibet is a very important component of our water security. It's a very important component of our border security. POK as well is a very important component. So for this, what are the necessities? One is a geopolitical alignment with countries that are willing to help us so far as the dealing with China is concerned, and countries that will also benefit from a military defeat. Let me tell you one thing about what, in my assessment, is happening in China. I'd like to say, as somebody who has followed Xi Jinping very closely, even before he took over in 2012, from about 2008, 2009 onwards. And frankly, I have a very high opinion of the people around him, and a very high opinion of his willpower and of his basically determination to get what he believes the Chinese deserve, which is anything that he believes they deserve, frankly. Look, this person, in the 100th year of the establishing of the Chinese Communist Party, which is coming due in a few months' time, he needs a major military victory, a victory which is a defeat of somebody else. There are 3 locations where he can secure that. One is the Taiwan Straits, South China Sea, and the Himalayan, the entire Himalayan massif. Obviously, they will want to move where they are certain of doing very well. And the question is, which of these 3 will be the easiest for them to succeed in? And if they believe it's going to be Taiwan, then they will make a move on Taiwan. If they believe it's a question of brushing away, navies from the South China Sea and effectively making it a Chinese lake, they will move there. If they believe it's a massive, establishing of control over the Himalayan massif, they will go on to that. But we are entering a period in which, we are also, in a sense, a target. And if at all they come to the conclusion that this is the easiest target, well, then they're going to move against us. These are very hard-nosed people. The people around Xi Jinping are not the people who are around, Wen Jiabao or Hu Jintao. These are young, tough, ruthless people. And I can tell you that what their worry is that the macro situation, in the case of our diplomacy and other matters, we are good at handling micro situations not just one micro situation, but a micro situation here, micro situation there, micro situation in some part of Africa, micro situation in the Middle East, micro situation with the United States or parts of the United States. The point is to deal with the macro situation. And that means framing a set of alliances. That means ensuring logistical support in a certain amount of scenarios. I do not know if scenario building is taking place between the Pentagon, for example, between the Defense Ministry in Japan, the Japanese Defense Forces, and the Indian Defense Forces. Hopefully they are, but if they are, and if we are looking in terms of logistical support, if we are looking in terms of what would I say? An expansion, if I may say so. And the reality of situation is the Americans have got tremendous dominance in escalation. So if you have an attack across the Himalayas and they escalated, even in the Horn of Africa or anywhere else, well, I can tell you that is going to be very difficult for the Chinese. So the question is, a war is coming, that is certain. It's only a question of timing. And if the calculation is the easiest country to wage a war against is India, it will be India. And no amount of talks is going to help that at all. And I mean, you're talking about 1994. I think the Chinese have long forgotten about that. I think as soon as they left the table, I mean, in half an hour, they would have forgotten about it. I'm glad that we are still talking about it in this month of 2020. But I can assure you, I don't think the Chinese would have talked about it for even 20 days after that particular thing. I only want to say we need to have a clear game plan for establishing a military victory, which will ensure a huge jump forward. So we create a rolling line of actual control right into the territory which is now controlled by the PLA. Do we have that? Do we have the capacity along with other countries? Yes. Do we have the intention? I do not know. Do we have the willpower? I do not know. Because after all, I'm not in government at all in any way. But I can tell you, sometimes, you have to go for broke. Sometimes you have to take a risk. The biggest risk is being afraid of taking a risk. And I can only say, I am all worried about the fact we are masters of the micro, but we don't seem to believe in the fact that we have to integrate the micro within a macro. It's, for example, tactics and strategy. We are sometimes, there are people, I mean, in politics, for example, you see people who are masters of tactics. In this situation, that situation, this situation. But there's no real overarching strategy. But the reality is, I don't know if it's possible in politics, it could be, because it's a lot of it is based on emotion, a lot of it based on emotion at a point in time. But in geopolitics, you need an overarching strategy. Frankly, maybe this because I don't know what the strategy is. There are, as I said, the Prime Minister is a very determined person. You have a brilliant person in Mr. Jaishankar. You have a very good national security setup. Possibly there's a strategy. But if we don't have that kind of strategy, if we don't have that willpower and that ambition, well, then we're going to face a problem. Because believe me, the Chinese system and the Chinese leadership will be severely impacted if they are defeated. And the same will happen in the case of India. If we are once again, as in 62, on the losing side.
Let me see if any of my colleagues have questions.
Yeah, Dr. Swamy, I have, there is a question actually from Sudesh from VHS. He's asking, at what point in time can we get aggressive? Is there a way? One, that's the second thing is when there is a global outrage. I mean, either of you can take it up. Can we take advantage of that and get aggressive with that?
Yes, sir.
Personally, I'd like to say, we are all outraged when we watch our television screens. We are all outraged when we watch what is happening. And then we go out of the door. And as soon as we reach the office, there is no outrage. We are back to doing normal work. So look, the fact is hard power. The Chinese understand that. And they're not worried about emotion and outrage and all that, because they don't have emotion. And I can tell you, they have a very simulated outrage to basically throw you off balance. The reality is hard power. And that's where I go back to the question of an alliance of logistics. For example, if we are assured of certain American weapon systems, and we are assured of stockpiles of these systems, if we are assured of diversionary fronts, we need not even be assured of that. The Indian military can do its job. But I would like to say it is the same situation as faced Britain when it was confronting Hitler, when Churchill told Roosevelt, give us the tools and we will finish the job. The Americans are looking at knocking the Chinese out of the ring so far as the sweepstakes for the primary power is concerned. Well, if they give us the tools, India can certainly accomplish that with the kind of first-class manpower we have in the military, manpower, woman power, human power. But the question is, I mean, I don't know if we are doing that. So far, we have not invited Australia to the Malabar exercises. We have not signed Becca. I don't know if we're having logistical discussions. I don't know if we're having this kind of scenario building of different things between the Pentagon, the Indian Defense Forces, the Australian Defense Forces, the Japanese Defense Forces. I'd be a lot more relaxed if we saw formalization of the Quad. I'd be a lot more relaxed if I could, frankly see a clear sign of a flow of logistics. And may I say one thing, I think some people here are admirers of Donald Trump. Frankly, the problem with Donald Trump, for him, the only emotion is a dollar sign. Now, if you're saying, okay, if I pick your pocket, then I'm friendly to you, you're not really friendly to me. So that's the problem with Donald Trump. If he looks upon this as how much money can I squeeze out of India? Why do you want to pay the Russians? Why do you want to pay the Israelis? Why do you want to pay the French? Buy from America. Well, that's not going to work. The reality is this was worth tens of trillions of dollars if there is a humiliation faced by China. Tens of trillions of dollars. And the question is, can Donald Trump look beyond his nose and see that? I'm not sure about that because, as I said, the big weakness about Donald Trump, for him, the dollar sign is predominant. The only strategy and the only tactics he believes in is the dollar sign. And with India, I can tell you that is unfortunate because if you have a good alliance with India and you have a clear assurance of logistics, believe me, I can tell you, there's no need to be aggressive. All you need to be is to be resolute. I don't believe in being aggressive. I believe in being resolute. And the fact is, if we'll indicate that resoluteness, if we are serious about the Quad, if we are serious about an Indo-American coming together in terms of logistics, our resolution will have to be seen in practice. And if that happens, I can tell you, the Chinese will come to talk and they'll be ready to talk and they'll be ready to work out an agreement which will be very different from what they're talking now, which is my way or the highway. Wang Yi is saying 100% I'm right, 0% you're wrong. And to the end of the discussion, he continues that. He changes it. It's 99.999% I'm right. So 0.0001% you are right. So that little concession we make from every talk.
What you are saying, from what you are saying, let me put it in a very summary form and tell me whether I'm wrong in summarizing it that way. One is we had no clue that the Chinese are thinking like this at any stage. Two, you think that we alone buying with our own money from wherever we get it are not enough to tackle the Chinese in the way we want it, and therefore we must have an alliance. Is that what's your answer to these two things that I have posed you?
Well, the first thing, I don't know what the government knows because I'm not in government. Nobody briefs me on anything, so I don't know what they know, what they don't know. I hope they know. What
they knew and did not know. They did not know the Chinese will do this. Would I be correct in saying that?
Well, I don't know what they knew and what they did not know, but I would only like to say that yes, about an alliance system, absolutely right. We are not going to be able to do this alone. China is a formidable force now. There's no question about it. And we need an alliance. And the reality is our geopolitical alignment. Let me tell you one thing, Dr. Swamy. China became a massive economic force because of Taiwan, because of Japan, and the United States. Today, these three countries are looking at separating from China. India would be the logical choice. But then India has to geopolitically signal it is part of this coalition. And then you have got Russia in the picture. The Sino-Russian alliance is today, they're Siamese twins. They're joined at the hip.
No,
And to say that you're,
no, I'm going to stop you. You are in fact saying what I had earlier asked, but you forgot to address it. The Russians are not the Soviet Union. The Russians are now pals of the Chinese. That's what you're saying?
look, you know the complete dependence of Russia on China,
Yes.
economically and diplomatically. If
Money
you have
wise.
that kind of dependence, I would like to ask you, what degree of freedom do you have? Let us say, for example, I'm completely dependent on X for my income, for my house, for everything else. Well, what kind of freedom do I have to basically refuse quote unquote advice? So, I'm surprised that we are such sentimental people that the problem is, Dr. Swamy, we are so used to the past and by past precedents, we don't understand that times change. And today times change every 6 months. In the past, you could frame a business policy for 3 years or 5 years. Today, if you're in business, you can't frame a policy for more than 6 months because in 6 months, there's a complete change. You've seen this over the last 6 months. So, I mean, I don't know what's happening in government because I'm not in government. I certainly hope that, that they have people out there who understand this.
Now, Arvind, you and Jagdish, you want to ask questions?
Yeah, I only, first of all, would like to thank both Dr. Swamy and Nalapat for having this clear-cut vision. I also was a blind bhakta, thinking that, they must have not come and sat on our land or this and that. But from the talk of both of you, it's become quite clear that all our 18 meetings have been useless. And here is your country coming and sitting on your land. And here we are spreading every day, giving gyan to people that no, our soldiers will fight for it. It's really shameful that in such a patriotic country where we criticize Jawaharlal Nehru, we are doing the same thing. And you are very clear that unless we have strategic alliance, nothing can come about. It's really a shameful and shocking that I hear both your views. And I believe Dr. Swamy is coming up with a new book on China. And I hope most of these things are covered in that book. I thank Mr. Nalapat.
And Jagdish, I only want to say that I would not say what you are saying about the government, etc. I have every hope and expectation that the government will take very strong action and that the government will ensure that the victory that I'm talking about will take place. So I can assure you, I've not given up hope at all.
Yeah. You are a very diplomatically you have put it. We also hope it is like that. We live by hope. And I'm very happy you are very diplomatically putting it that way.
I have one observation here. Just quickly.
Go ahead.
US is very keen on taking revenge from China for Wuhan virus. Whatever Churchill said to Roosevelt, that give us the tools and we'll finish the job. Is Modi going to say this to Trump, that give us the tools and we'll finish the job for you?
What happens if Biden comes?
Look, I don't believe it's going to make a difference for the simple reason that today, if you go to America, the enemy number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is the Communist Party of China. I'm not saying China or the Chinese people, the Communist Party of China, because systematically they have been working to replace the Americans at the top of the financial pyramid, the manufacturing pyramid, the services pyramid, the artificial intelligence, high-tech, space, every single pyramid. And frankly, Americans like being number 1. And they also realize a large part of their strength comes from being number 1. Supposing, for example, a newspaper, if you're number 1 in a market, you get about 70% of advertising. The second guy gets about 20%. 70% comes to you just because you're number 1. And that's what the Americans are getting. And the dollar is the reserve currency. Xi Jinping would like to displace the dollar and reset the dollar. And he's working hard through blockchain, through buying gold, and through other means to ensure that digital currency of the future medium of exchange globally is China made. So now the Americans know it's now or never. In another 4 years of presidential term, it'll be too late. And because Xi Jinping is a ruthless person, he's moving at speed. So the Americans know that. In my view, irrespective of whether it is Biden or Trump or anyone else, look, this rivalry is something, and that is what I'm saying. The main thing is now, when an inevitable military collision takes place, it's inevitable because Xi Jinping has built his support on being a militarized leader, on the army being front and center of his policies. You can't be a militarized leader and have military only for parades. You got to show that you're capable in war. And frankly, so far, it hasn't done a great job. It hasn't done a great job in Galwan at all. It has not done a great job in any other location. He needs a military victory.
All right. Last question.
Yeah,
Ramesh?
more of an observation, MD, and more from your whatever you have said. It is obvious that the US is looking some partner in India is prime to take that advantage, but I guess it's not happening right now. That India is not taking advantage of the situation, saying, okay, let's align with the US, make it very clear that we will align and then go forward based on that. Because obviously we cannot beat Chinese in any form because we have the might only in the maybe foot soldier, but that also we cannot claim. But if you look at hardware, right?
Ramesh, we have a lot of advantages and we need not declare this publicly or anything. The Chinese in the late 70s and the 80s, they went and supported the Americans. They didn't say that. They both abused each other throughout those years. We can continue to abuse each other throughout these years, but effectively work to ensure the collapse of the Chinese Communist Party, which is what the Americans want. India can be what China was in that period.
Thank you.
And keep the Russians at a distance.
Jagdish, you go ahead, Jagdish.
Okay, let's conclude.
Yes, Arvind.
Thank you, Dr. Swamy and Professor Nalapat for bringing these important issues on the table. I think what you said is India needs to be resolute, and we hope that the powers in Delhi will take a hint from what you said. Clues are important, but these clues have to be given. As Jagdish said, India is seen to be not active or passive actually, and therefore we have to be active and resolute. Thank you very much for bringing these issues on the table. We have been meeting every Sunday like this. Next Sunday also we'll come up with another topic. We'll have Dr. Subramanian Swamy with us and with a new issue. We thank both the speakers of the day. I thank my co-host Jagdish Shetty, Ramesh Swamy, and the technical team headed by Ashish Shetty, Tejas, Swaminathan, Gadgi Rakesh, and Ishwar Iyer, and Vishal Mehta. Thank you very much to the viewers that we will be meeting again next Sunday at 8 p.m. with a new topic and Dr. Subramanian Swamy. Thank you very much. Namaskar. Jai Hind.